got one?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So, so that being said, I learned this process. It was a complex process when I first started. 12 years later, financial aid is still a complex process, and I do it every day. So as you're going through this process, I want you to, and even if you've done it before, to give yourself a little grace, because finances can be stressful. Government documents can be stressful. So give yourself a little grace. It is a lot of information, and especially as your student graduates and starts looking at different options, different colleges, different kinds of opportunities. It's a lot of information. So my goal today is to hopefully give you a little bit more information about what that process even looks like. It's going to be a kind of a brief overview. Now, I am a diehard Coastal fan. I love Coastal, obviously graduated twice from there. They can't get rid of me. So they signed my paycheck. I want all of you to send your students to Coastal. I love it there. But I am realistic. I know that not everybody is going to go to Coastal. And maybe you'll end up there later for a graduate degree or something. So some of the things that I mentioned are specific to Coastal because I do think it's good for you to know your options here locally. I think sometimes Coastal gets looked over because they are the local school. But there are some things that are financial aid, whether you're going to Georgetown Tech, whether you're going to Coastal Carolina University, or you're going to the University of Miami or Clemson, Carolina. So some of this is going to be Coastal specific, but I'll tell you how that translates if you're thinking about going to other schools. So these are things that we're going to go over today. So just a general overview of the different financial aid programs that are available. I want you to know what questions to ask as you start looking at where you're going to school, where your students going to school, and just encourage you to ask the questions, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. We're going to talk a lot about scholarships. I don't know about you, but I like free money. I like when people say, here's free money you don't have to pay back. And in the world of financial aid, that is typically grants and scholarships. So we're going to talk about both of those things. What scholarship programs are out there, and what questions should I be asking these institutions about scholarships? We're going to talk a little bit about filling out the FAFSA too. Yes?
Will there be any kind of handout?
I don't have a handout, and I'll tell you why. So the federal government stopped printing handouts for us to give, specifically for financial aid. But I will have lots of websites to send you to that you can write down and go to and get the information.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
If I may interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got some handouts that I'll go ahead and hand that way. You'll just take one and pass it. I'll start at the other side. Some of this may actually be helpful to what you're.
Yes.
I'm not here by the same rules she is. I kind of get to do my thing.
Yeah.
Y'all just take one and pass it, then I'll start one here and go back.
Thank you. And then I would, I'd like to also provide an opportunity, because I know some people have some very specific questions. We'll provide a time for general questions, and then I'll also stick around for a little bit afterwards. Sometimes people are afraid to ask these questions kind of in front of a crowd, so I'll be glad to answer any questions one-on-one.
If y'all get them done, just set them down on the floor back there. I'll collect them. I ain't worried about it that much.
Most of this stuff you pretty much know. Now parents and students, I do have kind of bad news and good news. The bad news is that college is expensive. If you don't know, college costs are ridiculous. That is one of the questions that you need to ask. How much does it cost to go here? And I know that seems really basic, but I cannot tell you how many times I have the conversation with students and parents at move-in, which is way too late. And they come in and they say, I've got to pay how much? How are we going to do this? I'm asking that you start having that conversation now. How much does it cost for me to go here? How much will I end up having to pay out of pocket? The earlier we can start, the better. Typically, the time frame in the fall, you're filling out the FAFSA, you're filling out applications for colleges, and a lot of times you're filling out scholarship applications. And so you're gonna kind of make that decision of, I'm gonna go to this school here by May 1st, and then start finalizing the process of going to that school. So that's kind of the timeline that you're looking at. Want to stay organized. Again, you're about to get a lot of information from different institutions, from different schools, from different places. I have parents that show up with binders this big, stuffed with all the papers they got from the school. Whatever kind of way works for you, just keep in mind, stay organized, and the big part of that is pay attention to deadlines. Especially during COVID, deadlines did not really mean a whole lot. But there have been, and there are many times where I have to tell students and parents, you miss the deadline, you don't get the money. So just really pay attention to those deadlines. Write them on the front of the big folder or calendar or fridge or wherever you do that. Make sure, there are a lot of schools that have gone test optional. We are one of them. Coastal is test optional. Some schools temporarily went test optional due to COVID, and they may not continue that, but many schools are starting to move in that trend. However, I would encourage you, if you're able to consider taking the test. And the one reason I say that, especially for South Carolina residents, is because South Carolina has scholarships, and test scores may play into that. So I would encourage you, if you can, take either the SAT or ACT and look around for prep courses or resources online that help you do that. I would encourage you to visit the school once, maybe even more than once. And I know that can be difficult, especially if you're looking at an out-of-state school. But there is something about being on the campus. I will never forget, about 2 years ago, I had a family that I've known since I was 16. They have sons that graduated from Socastee High School. The son didn't really know what he wanted to do, so he came to Coastal's campus for a tour. They sat in my office and they said, oh my goodness, Coastal is a real college. And I said, what do you mean? Of course. And they said, no, we just have never been on campus to know what it looks like. And so I encourage you, wherever your student's thinking about going, go visit it. We know that students who feel like they belong somewhere tend to be more successful, and so we want them to start getting into the community and feeling that sense of belonging early on. It's pretty important. And then when you're visiting those places, that's when you can start asking the questions. When you're on the tour, ask the admissions counselor, hey, how much does it cost to go here? What scholarship opportunities do you have? Those things are important. If there are any students in here, and senioritis is real, but keep those senior grades up. I have seen it make a difference, good and bad, where it cost a student a scholarship because they did not keep their senior grades up, or a student wasn't originally offered a scholarship and then turned in senior grades and was able to get one. So keep those senior grades up. And then with everything financial aid, the earlier you do it, the better off that you are. A lot of this stuff is on a first come, first served basis. So if you do it late, you may not get it if you had done it to begin with. So just want to remind you, those are just some kind of general tips. So there's lots of financial aid. I have a lot of words up here. There's not going to be a test later, I don't think. But basically, financial aid, the bad news is the college is expensive. The good news is that there is money out there for students to go to college. And that is what the purpose of financial aid is. Now, what that financial aid is may differ. So we like, again, free money we like, that's typically scholarships and grants. Scholarships tend to be based on merit, so things like GPA, test score, writing an essay, a letter of recommendation, something like that. Grants tend to be more based on your financial need. And I know you're probably thinking, well, of course we all have financial need, right? There are definitions of what financial need is. Work study is another type of financial aid that's out there. There is a federal work study program where students can work on campus and get money for that. But also just student employment period may be beneficial to your student wherever school that they are attending. Nobody likes the 4-letter word loan, and I know that. Nobody wants a loan, but loans are a type of financial aid that are out there, so we will talk about that. For many students, out some type of student loan, depending on where they're going. Now, if your student is local and staying local, and maybe even staying in the state and has a good GPA, a good scholarship set, they may not take out student loans. But especially if they're considering going out of state, or if they don't have scholarship GPAs or something like that, they may have to look at taking out a loan. And again, don't shoot the messenger, but it's my job to give you all your options so that when you see this on an award letter, you know what it is. So we'll talk a little bit about loans too. So again, merit-based, we talked about that. That's a scholarship based on test scores, GPA, things like that. Need-based is based on financial need. If you hear the word gift aid again is another word. That's free money. We like gift aid. And then there's self-help aid, which those are things that you typically have to pay back. A parent plus loan, private loan, a federal student loan. So if you hear those things, many schools will break up their award letters based on the category of aid. So that's why I'm sharing that with you. I know it's a little bit of financial aid ease, but when you see it on an award letter, I want you to be able to know what you're looking at. So keep going. We're gonna. So again, we talked about the different types of financial aid. One of the first questions that you should ask is, what is your institution giving me? What scholarships are you giving me? Every school is different. Some of them will have merit-based scholarships, which is test score, GPA. Some of them will have need-based scholarships, which is usually based on the FAFSA or some kind of need. They may have a separate application you have to fill out. Some scholarships are application-based, meaning your student actually has to do an application. We have, at Coastal, we have the only way that we give money is through our merit-based awards, and we have some need-based awards that students get considered for when they apply. The application-based scholarships, we have some donor scholarships. There are people who want to give your student money, and they do it in the form of scholarships, and so your student can apply for those donor scholarships. I know USC has application-based scholarships as well, University of South Carolina. Clemson does as well, so they have both types. So you just want to make sure that you're asking that question. What kind of institutional money do you have that you can give me? As a financial aid professional, I hate to say this, and I know we're being recorded, that's okay. Another kind of strategy is, hey, Coastal's giving me $3,000. What are you going to give me? A lot of times there's not a whole lot of room for negotiation, but we have, especially kind of as the competition gets higher and higher, seen some schools that have started kind of playing that game. And so I'm the kind of person I'd rather you ask and be told no than never ask. So ask that question. Hey, I've got an offer letter for $10,000. What are y'all going to give me? And you may get some things there. We're going to talk a lot more about the South Carolina State Lottery scholarships that are out there. That's the Life and the Hope and the Palmetto Fellows. But South Carolina does offer those scholarships for South Carolina residents. South Carolina also uses the lottery to fund what's called the South Carolina Need-Based Grant. So that's a grant that's available to its residents. If your student's thinking about going to a private school, there's something called the South Carolina Tuition Grant they can apply for. And then our two-year schools get some other funding, lottery tuition assistance grant. That's usually you'll see LTAP. So you may see those things funded from the state. A large portion of my job is dealing with the federal government. So the government gives students money. Those are federal aid. So if you've heard of the Pell Grant, that's federal grant funding. And then, of course, from the FAFSA and filling out the FAFSA, the other type of federal aid out there is student loans. So direct student loans is what they're called. If you've been around, you may have heard them referred to as Stafford loans. That's the old name for it. Subsidized, unsubsidized, you may hear those things. And so those are all there. And then there are some parent loans. And again, if there are students in here, this is when I tell them to snuggle up close to you and kiss your cheek. Because as a parent, you can borrow for your student. So that's a type of loan. Then there's this fourth piece. And so I like to remind people that sometimes the financial aid offer letter that you get from your school may not cover everything. And so then there's this fourth piece of, okay, now what? And so you want to start looking at what are the other options. So a lot of schools do or you can take out what's called a private loan. I would encourage you not to do that unless it is your absolute last option. But private loans tend to be, high interest rates, so want to kind of look out for that. Outside scholarships, Oscar Mayer used to have a scholarship for students named Oscar, so you could apply for that. But that's another option that is out there. So just looking at the different pieces. So we've already talked about some of this. For scholarships, asking your institution, do they have merit-based, need-based? Do I have to apply? Do I have to write an essay? Do I have to, provide proof of community service? Something along those lines. And then outside scholarships. So like I said, there are organizations that offer scholarships. Your students can take a look at that. I will tell you on Coastal's financial aid website, if you go to the scholarship section, and most schools are doing this now, we offer scholarship search engines. So, if your student is going to major in biology, they'll go to the scholarship search engine, type in biology, and all these scholarships will pop up. If your student is from a single parent household, or maybe the student is a single parent, they can go to this website, they can type those in as keywords, and it will pull up all these scholarships. So whether your student's coming to Coastal or wanting to go anywhere else, that website is a resource because it's not necessarily school specific. So that's on Coastal's website under scholarships. You'll see a link that says external scholarships. I also, and again, I'm not trying to convince you to go to Coastal, but there is something called the Horry County Higher Education Commission, and so I do want to take some time to talk about that. Horry County gives a little bit over $1 million in tax revenue every year to the Horry County Higher Education Commission. It is to serve the people of Horry County, and it serves the people of the students of Horry County who go to Coastal. And so about $575,000 of that is spent in student scholarships. It's just for Horry County residents. So our office has, and they usually come out in January, scholarship applications specifically for Horry County residents. So I wanted to mention that. The application is on our website. It's being built right now, so it's not posted there, but you can put a reminder in your phone in January to go talk to Coastal about scholarships for Horry County students. That is not for any other school, so again, not trying to get you to come to Coastal, but that is available to our Horry County students. Always like to mention. I put a little star here. Ask the question, am I getting this scholarship just one time, or can I keep it all 4 years? And if I keep it all 4 years, what do I have to do to keep it? Because that's not fun conversation to have is, well, I had this scholarship last year, well, you didn't do what you need to do to keep it. So make sure you're asking that question. As I mentioned, South Carolina has a robust state scholarship program. The lottery funds are lottery scholarships, so that's the Hope, the Life, and the Palmetto Fellows. Now, our office and most schools will, there's not an application, will review you automatically once your student submits their high school transcripts to the school. But basically, we look at people that have over a 3.0 high school GPA, and then if that's all you have, the 3.0 high school GPA, you'll get what's called the Hope Scholarship, and that's $2,800 for the year. You only get that 1 year, but if you do well your first year, then you can go to the Life Scholarship your second, third, and fourth year. If after you graduate high school, you have a 3.0 high school GPA and you meet one of two other requirements, 1100 on the SAT or 22 on the ACT, they just changed that for this year. I think it's 22 now. Or you rank in the top 30% of your class. Then when you leave high school, instead of getting the Hope, you actually get the Life Scholarship. That's $5,000 towards your education, which is a pretty substantial scholarship. That is if you stay in South Carolina. That's only you have to graduate from South Carolina high school and then stay in South Carolina.
Is that also like Hope 1 year?
The Life Scholarship is renewable, so you can keep it essentially for 4 years. Technically, it's 8 semesters.
Okay.
So if they graduate early, they could actually get it in summer, but it's 8 semesters, so usually it's 4 years. And to keep that, you just have to have a 3.0. Now they call it a life GPA, which looks at all college work. So what I'm seeing right now is a whole bunch of students who take college coursework in high school, don't do well, and it hurts their life GPA. So even though they may come to Coastal and get a 4.0, but because they got an F in English 101 in high school, it brings that GPA down. So just be careful there, but you can renew that every year. The Palmetto Fellows, I will be honest, I don't usually memorize the criteria for that because your high school guidance counselors will identify students who meet the criteria for Palmetto Fellows. There are two ways to qualify for that. There's the, I think you have to have a 1400 on the SAT, rank in the top 6% of your class, and have a GPA over 3.5 or something. And there's a second way without the rank, but it's a higher SAT score, ACT. Palmetto Fellow students are usually identified at the end of their junior year by high school guidance counselors. They fill out paperwork with the high school and submit it to the state, and then the state tells us who's getting Palmetto Fellows. So that's one of the reasons I don't really memorize that. But it is on our website if you ever have questions. So, and again, that is $6,700 for the first year, $7,500 for every year after that. So that's a nice little scholarship for top tier students. And then many schools, we actually match that with another $2,000 scholarship. It's a pretty nice scholarship to get. These scholarships also carry an enhancement for our STEM majors. So that may be of particular interest here. If you are in an approved math or science major, and each college has different approved majors, but you know, biology, I would use that as an example. I'm a biology major going to Coastal, and I, you know, have the Life Scholarship or the Palmetto Fellow Scholarship or even the Hope Scholarship. If in that first year I get my 3.0 and 30 credits, of those 30 credits, if 14 of them are in approved math and science courses, not only will I renew that scholarship for the second year, I'll actually get an extra $2,500. It's an enhancement on top of the scholarship. And so, again, I don't expect you to remember the specifics of that, but if your student's going into a STEM major, ask your school, hey, is this an approved major? Talk to your advisors. Make sure I'm in 14 approved math and science courses. Most schools have advisors that know these rules for South Carolina residents, but I'm just a big proponent of making sure you know the process. So, your student doesn't get any of those state scholarships when they come out. Maybe for some reason they got a 2.99 GPA. They actually, as long as at the end of their first year they have a 3.0 life GPA and they get the 30 credits, their second year they can get the life scholarship. So it's a really great scholarship program to keep good students in South Carolina, so I want to make sure that you're familiar with that. And then I've already mentioned the South Carolina need-based grant. Have anybody in here who wants to go into education? Okay.
Good call. I was a teacher.
Oh, I was too. So I was the elementary ed major, and it makes the teaching crisis makes me sad. But
Pre-K through 12.
yes. So there are special programs for education. So if anybody ever decides that they want to do that, make sure you're asking about those special programs. I won't spend time for you. Go ahead and put the next slide. And then again, there are federal programs. There's the Pell Grant. There's the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, Work Study, and then student loans. And you go to the next slide. And there's a special grant for teachers that I hate. I wish it was called Teach Loan. Keep going. We're talking about all that. Federal student loans. So I do want to mention this. The federal student loans, they are the best kind of loan that a student can get. I like to encourage students and parents not to take loans, but if they have to, see it as an investment. Anybody know the average student loan debt for an undergrad degree?
80,000.
I thought it was like 67, something like that.
No.
No?
It's around $34,000, which is, if you think about it, about the price of a car. So I really, there are smart ways to do it and there are dumb ways to do it. The direct student loans are the best way that a student, if they have to take out a loan, they need to do this first. It's in the student's name. Doesn't matter how old they are, it's in the student's name. Fixed interest rate, right now it's 4%. Technically right now it's 0% because of COVID, but that's supposed to change at the end of December. Any student who fills out a FAFSA downside is the amount is limited, so first-year students are only allowed $5,500, so that may not be enough. But, you know, encourage students to take this out before they take any other type of loan out. So. I want to show you an example, and then after this, we're going to get to the facts. I want to show you some examples, and this is, I think, helps kind of drive home some of the points that I was talking about earlier. If your student, and these are coastal numbers, but we're pretty comparable with other South Carolina schools. So College of Charleston, University of South Carolina, Clemson, their housing prices may be a little bit higher, but our tuition is pretty comparable. South Carolina is really good at keeping tuition pretty flat, but there may be some fluctuation from year to year. So for coastal, it does cost about $12,000 to go for a year for an in-state student. That's before any financial aid. One thing I like to remind people is that there are other costs involved. So $12,000 will get you tuition. Keep in mind your student needs books, and books can be expensive depending on what kind of major they're going in. Many places have rental programs or something like that, but you want to ask that question: how much does the average student spend on books? We estimate about $1,000 a year. It's a rough estimate. We actually have a program now where books are included in tuition, so it helps bring those costs way down, but we still use the estimate just in case for $1,000. So if I'm a high-need student, so if I fill out the FAFSA and the FAFSA people say you're a very high-need student, we'll talk about what that means in a minute. I get all the grants. I get a Pell Grant, I get a Coastal Merit Award, I get the Life Scholarship and direct student loans. My financial aid package is pretty good. It's about $20,000. I only need $12,000 for tuition, so if I was counseling this student, I would tell them, get rid of the loans. Don't take them. You don't need them. So that's one example. You can go to the next slide. If a student is living on campus, that changes things a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have enough. So in this example, you can see room and board is about another $10,000 to add on to that. And so when this student takes out those student loans and is living on campus, they're only about $3,000 short. So if they had an external scholarship, or if they could set up a payment plan, that might be a little bit more reasonable. But the point is, living on campus, something will bring that bill up. So you want to make sure that you're not just asking about tuition, you're asking about all the costs.
Does Coastal have the net calculator on the website?
We do. We have the net price calculator, which will do all this for you. It's amazing. If you're a low-need student, so you do the FAFSA, and the FAFSA says you don't have any need. And again, need is, FAFSA is not real good with real life, so the FAFSA says you have no need. You don't qualify for any grants. That does change the financial aid package a little bit. And so this is an example. Even living off campus, the student, unless they take the student loans, they would not have enough. With the student loans, they do have a little bit. Yes.
You don't have to live on campus,
Where? At Coastal? No, if you live within so many miles, 50 miles. Now, every school's going to be a little bit different, so you want to make sure that that's a question you want to
Is there
ask.
around here within that?
Yes, yeah. Anybody in Horry County?
Ready?
Yes,
Um,
that's okay.
Very hard to hear.
That's okay, and so same thing, if this student, lived on campus, you can see they need a lot more money, they need about $10,000 more, they don't have any grants. So just a point, these are the types of things that are gonna be happening, you're gonna be getting award letters from schools, and you're gonna have to compare the costs, compare the different things. One thing I will kind of warn you about, some schools will put on the financial aid award letter, loans already on there. So just be mindful, if you see that this school is giving you $40,000, make sure you see that word loan, because, that $40,000 might include a loan.
Dr. Hicks,
Some
when
schools
should
don't.
they expect those award letters?
Usually, we are the earliest in the state. We usually send them, again, I'm not trying to get you to come to Coastal. We usually send them out sometime in January or February, but it's usually in the spring when they start going out. So most of the schools are February is when they start sending them. And then we talked about that parent plus loan and private loan. So in the spring is when you would start making these decisions. Okay, we've got our financial aid package. What does that look like? Do we have enough? Do we not have enough? What do we do? And so if you did find out that you had a shortfall, you would start applying for things like the parent plus loan, which is a parent loan in your name. It can never be transferred out. Actually, there is legislation right now that someone just introduced to try to rate federal loan, so it's an okay loan. Interest rate right now is about 7%. If a parent is approved for that loan, that can cover up to the cost of attendance. And actually, that loan's pretty, people have a lot more success with that loan because it's not a traditional credit check, which is good and scary at the same time, because you do have to pay it back. If you're, as a parent, you apply for this and you're denied that loan, it actually still benefits the student because they would get additional loan money in their own name. So that's something that we help students and parents navigate. And then I talked about the private loan through private lenders like Sallie Mae, Wells Fargo, Discover. Stay away from them if at all possible. But they are an option. Again, it's my job to tell you all the options that are out there. And then different schools use different things for payment plans. So we have a kind of an in-house payment plan. We don't have an interest rate or anything on that. It takes the bill, breaks it up into 4 payments. And so you want to ask that question to your school. What kind of payment plan options do you have? Because it can help make that, much more manageable. You can go to the next slide. Keep going. We already talked about this. Keep going. All right, let's talk about the FAFSA. Now, FAFSA for 23-24 has been available since Saturday at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I always have fun to look and see what student and what state did the first FAFSA. I actually have students that will stay up all night to do it because we tell them it's first come, first serve. What they probably don't know is it doesn't matter if you do it at 2 o'clock or 8 o'clock. But the FAFSA is available now for 23-24. So I would encourage you to go ahead and start preparing to get that done if you haven't done so already. You can go to the next slide. It is done online. So it's, you can go to studentaid.gov, .gov. So you want to make sure that you do that. There are some states that have state deadlines for the FAFSA. We do not for the public school system. If you're going to the private loans, in the private school, some of those grants that are associated with private schools have a deadline, so make sure that you're looking at that deadline. You will see things like priority deadline, so Coastal has a March 1st priority deadline for FAFSA. It's not a hard deadline, it just means we want you to get it done before that. So you can go to the next slide. The FAFSA belongs to the student, and it is the student's FAFSA. I'm sure you're all familiar with HIPAA in the medical world. I will tell you, once your student starts attending a college class, they then become covered under something called FERPA, which says that we can't tell anybody anything about that student's account without the student being there. And if you're a parent paying the bill, that can be real fun. But I get this question a lot. I have a FAFSA as a parent. No, your student has a FAFSA, so they fill it out now. It's a federal government document, and it asks for tax information and your parents' tax information. So chances are you're pretty heavily involved. But your student will need to sign up for what's called an FSAID. That is a username and password. And then as a parent, you will have a username and password as well. If you're a parent that has multiple students going to different schools, each student will have a FAFSA, and you'll sign each FAFSA with your username and password. That's kind of how that will work. You and your student will use every year they're in college. One of the kind of warnings I put out there is if your student sets up this username and password with their Horry County Schools email address, and then they graduate high school, and Horry County Schools turns off that email address, that's going to be annoying. You're going to have to, we'll probably find that out your sophomore year when you try to do the FAFSA again. So make sure that they are using their own email address. Don't have the student set up with your email address, because again, you have to have your own username and password. So that will make things go a lot smoother if you set this up first. You set it up and have your student set it up. Put it somewhere important. For me, it's probably not the most secure, but mine stays in my cell phone. I have a Word document that has it on there. So it's something that you use every year. So again, you'll do the FAFSA online, FAFSA.gov, studentaid.gov. Those are the websites that you go to do that. Interesting thing about the FAFSA is a snapshot of the day you fill it out. So the FAFSA is going to ask some demographic information. What's your marital status? How many people are in your household? And then it's gonna ask some income information. What was your adjusted gross income? The demographic information is based on the day you fill it out. The income information is based on 2 years ago. It's real interesting. The 23-24 FAFSA is being based on income from 2021. Yes?
If our income this year has changed dramatically from last year, how does that?
It went up, right? Your income went up.
No,
You won the
way
lottery?
down. No,
Oh, okay.
I wish.
I was gonna say, maybe later, no. That's a lot can happen in 2 years.
Okay.
In real life, a lot can, in normal life, a lot can happen. Parents unfortunately can die. People get divorced. Job get lost. With COVID, we've seen that even more, where people's income situation has changed. Contact your school. We do have ways that in certain circumstances, usually you lost your job, your income's drastically different, we can look and see if there's something that we can do. FAFSA is basically a big mathematical formula. It's taking all this information in, and then it's spitting out a number. And that number is called the expected family contribution. In theory, that number is how much you as a family can support your child for a year in education. Now, in reality, they don't ask you what your rent is or what your mortgage is. They don't ask you how many, bills you have to pay, how many times your high schools hit you up for money that year. It's just what we have to use. And so that number can be anywhere between 0, 999,999. It has to be under 5,000 to qualify for grants. And I say that because I'm seeing where a lot of students fall in that middle range. They might have a 10,000 ESC, which says, hey, I don't have a whole bunch of money to attend school, but it's not low enough to qualify for grants. So sometimes when your income changes, it may bring that number down some, but not enough to get more financial aid. So it just depends. So make sure you reach out to your school. Yes?
Does it take into account if we have 2 kids going to college?
Yes, it does. This year. In 24, 25, the FAFSA is completely changing and will not. So that's just a fun stuff to look forward to. So you can go to the next slide. So some common questions that we get about filling out the FAFSA. My student's 18. I'm not supporting them. They can do this by themselves. Remember I told you FAFSA is not good with real life. FAFSA assumes what I call family privilege. It assumes that every student has a family that can help support them go to college. I've done this long enough to know that is not the case. So they have very definite definitions of what is a dependent student and what is an independent student. And typically students are dependent until they're 24. I don't know what is magical about 24, but 24 is the magical number. There are special circumstances where that may not be true. Your student is married, they are an orphan or a ward of the court, they were in foster care, they're homeless, or maybe you as a family are homeless, they're a veteran, active duty military, they have a child they support 50% or more, or they cannot, for some reason, have contact with their parents, and there are things like police reports and GSS and things like that that are involved. They would have to document those situations. We get a lot of people who call and say, I have a special situation. Sometimes I feel bad because to me it's not so special, and I don't mean that the way it sounds, but we deal with it a lot because, again, FAFSA is just not good with real life. So if you or someone you know is in one of those special circumstances, have them reach out to the school. So the student goes on the FAFSA, and then their parents go on the FAFSA. And that is both demographic and income information. So then a lot of times we get the question, okay, what is a parent? You can go to the next slide. We get that question, and so it's not an unusual question. According to FAFSA, a parent is biological or adopted parent. So grandma who raised you, aunt and uncle who raised you, they are not parents. They have legal custody of you. That does not mean they are your parent. So again, that's one of the But there are other processes that we can do where actually we make the student an independent student because they can't provide parental information. So they would fill out the FAFSA and basically say, I can't give my parent
So I
information.
should go to Coastal and work with them on that to FAFSA? Okay.
Yep, so I'll give you a call later.
You work with Jackie, Frankie?
Weeks,
I
Frankie
don't know.
Weeks.
I don't know what her last name is, she's my neighbor.
Yeah,
She said, come talk to her, and come.
yeah, probably, it's probably Frankie Weeks with me yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we get these hairy situations, the other thing is we get divorce situations. Okay, which parent do we use? So it is the biological parent that, what the FAFSA says, hey, you've lived with this parent more in the past 12 months. But what if it's equal split? Then it's, whichever parent financially supports you 50% or more. Well, again, what if it's equal split? Read between the lines. FAFSA is income based. Okay. And then if there's a divorce situation, it is the parent they choose, the biological parent they choose, and if that parent is married, that spouse has to, stepmom, stepdad has to go on there too, including their income. And that's a rule of the FAFSA. Even if that step parent says, I have nothing financially to do with your child, that is something they require. So, you can go to the next slide. There's also this fun little, so you submit the FAFSA, you can do this big scary thing, and actually, they've made it, I think I can do a FAFSA in like 10 minutes, but I do it every day. So, they've made it a lot easier than it was when I first started. They actually have a button now that you can click, it'll take you to the IRS website, and it'll pull all your tax information in for you. Used to, you had to sit down with your tax returns and go line by line by line by line, and so they actually got this new process where it talks directly to the IRS. For most people, some people still can't use it depending on their tax filing status, and it submits it on the FAFSA for you. So I encourage you to do that. There is this back-end process. 1 out of every 3 FAFSAs get selected for this process called verification. You get notice from your school that, hey, we need copies of your tax documents, and you're kind of freaking out thinking, what did I do wrong? Nothing necessarily. They just make us audit kind of people who fill out the FAFSA and make sure they did it right. So you could see that your school starts asking you for additional information just to make sure you fill out the FAFSA right. Now, sometimes you fill out the FAFSA wrong. We're going to fix it. It might change what you're eligible for, but you may see that. So you can go to the next slide. And again, if your student can't provide parental data or income has drastically changed, or maybe, oh my gosh, I'm lost, I don't know where the heck I'm doing, how I'm doing it, or, we see this a lot, especially in Maury County, maybe my parent is not, is an undocumented visitor here, and I'm not sure that I want to put their information here. Talk to your school. We can help try to navigate those types of situations. That's what we're there for. I promise financial aid people are not like mean people sitting there trying to take your money. Most of us, can't say all, most of us really like our jobs and really help students, really like helping students. So make sure you touch base with us. You can go to the next slide. That is all that I kind of have. Does anybody have any burning financial aid questions?
Applying for the financial aid before the student knows which college he or
Yes.
she is attending.
Great question.
So we should try to get as much aid as possible, even though the schools, one may be coastal, one may be in the state.
Yes.
That, I know the South Carolina funds would only be usable in state.
Right.
But what if there's possibility of a child or a student going out of state and possibly also in state depending on.
That's a great question. So you're looking at, and I think I saw something said, most students on average are getting, they're applying to like 5 colleges, and they're really trying to consider 3. So when you fill out the FAFSA, you can list up to 10 schools on that document. And those schools will get access, you gotta list them on there, they'll get access to that FAFSA. Many schools, you actually have to apply to the school first, or you don't have to do it first, but you have to, because FAFSA is available now, but they won't start talking to you until you apply. So fill out the FAFSA,
Who won't start talking?
the school.
The school, okay.
Yes, yeah. So fill out the FAFSA, apply to the school starts, when I say talking, They're gonna start sending mail, they're probably gonna call you, we're probably gonna text you, we'll do everything short of showing up at your door. And some of us might
To
even do
the
that.
parent or to the student?
To begin with, maybe both, but most of it's gonna be geared to the student. I'm sorry, I just pointed out if you're the student, but, most of it is gonna go to the student. And so it's gonna be through mail, through whatever email address you put on the application, whatever cell phone number you put on the application. Texting's a big thing that we're doing now, so.
So if you would just backtrack to what you had said earlier, that for the FAFSA, is it, we actually put both contexts, student and parent.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, yeah, and same thing, when you apply, to a college, a lot of times they will ask for student contact information and parent contact information, and they use that a lot of times to contact both.
And in the case of a divorced set of parents, one is in state, one is out of state, do both parents' finances looked at by FAFSA?
No, you would have to decide which parent's going on there. And so, again, who did the student live with most, or who supported the student most, or if it's split 50-50, it's income based. So think about it. So, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And the FAFSA is what tells you if you're eligible for any federal grants. That's gonna be true whether you go to Coastal, whether you go to University of Miami, or, University, I don't know, Tennessee, it'll be true wherever you go. FAFSA gives you aid and whatever you're eligible for, you can take anywhere. Then the schools have different scholarships and things like that. Thought I saw some more hands, yes.
If taxes are filed as married filing separate as parents, do both parents still get their information in the FAFSA?
Yes, so the day you fill out the FAFSA, the parents are married, correct? They just filed married filing separately in 2021. Yes, both tax information will need to be added onto the FAFSA. Now, in that scenario, you cannot use that cool little tool that talks to the IRS, because it's not smart enough to add them together. You would have to sit down and manually add them together. So it's gonna ask you for adjusted gross income. And if you click, FAFSA is pretty good now where it shows you, go to your 1040, look at line 1, and add that to your other spouse's, line 1. So, but yes, you would manually add that together. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, if I heard you correctly, you said we have to do this every year. Every year.
Yes, it's fun. The FAFSA application is every year. And then depending on what other financial aid is out there, if you're taking out loans, you can do that every year. October 1. And so I usually tell students and parents, October and January, put a reminder in your phone. Send little sweet Johnny to go to financial aid, to talk about financial aid before they come home or whatever. So, yes.
We have a junior that's going to graduate early. He's not considered a senior until the second semester.
Okay.
So can you still apply for FAFSA now?
Yes, so you want to do it the October before he goes to college. So if he's starting in 23 fall, go ahead and do it now. Now, if you're going to school in South Carolina, check with your financial aid office, because there's some forms and some kind of special regulations for students who finish early for those state scholarships. I know there's one where your principal has to sign off or something, form you have to fill out.
Yeah.
And can't use class rank, because you're not in that class rank.
And he looks like that will be on the first.
Okay, we'll take it, yes.
Let's say a student starts off at Horry Georgetown and then transfers after 2 years to Coastal. How does that affect any kind of grants or scholarships that they can get being a transfer student?
Great question. So any school will kind of treat transfers a little differently, and I'll tell you right now, we're gonna beg you to come in. Transfer populations are way low right now. So the FAFSA, it doesn't necessarily affect one way or the other. It's still based off income and all that stuff. Where it could affect are scholarships. And so, like for us, we have scholarships specifically for transfer students. So we look at them when they transfer in, to see if they're gonna qualify for any. classes actually transfer in? And do I need a certain number of credit hours to get that scholarship? So making sure that while I'm at Fort Georgetown or, you know, wherever I am, that I'm getting my 30 credits and a 3.0, because scholarships will depend on that. Yes?
If the student gets into the bridge program, does the life scholarship provide that?
So, are you specific on bridge program coastal?
HTC and
Okay.
coastal bridge program.
Yeah, and the reason I asked, there's several bridge programs in the state. So the life scholarship is available at two-year schools. It actually works a little bit differently than what you saw up here. So it's basically a 3.0 high school GPA, and then they can get the life scholarship for so many years while they're at Fort Georgetown Tech. Now, most bridge programs, you're a student of a two-year school, and then maybe you're living on the campus of a four-year school, so that can get confusing because your financial aid and your bill is all at this two-year school, but then I'm living here at Coastal or Clemson has a bridge program. So just make sure you know where to send the FAFSA, and if you're not sure, again, you can send the FAFSA to 10 schools, so send them everywhere. Yes?
So let's say the student, when that student graduates from high school, decides to take a year off before applying to
Great question.
college. How does that affect the applications to college? Would it be kind of better to apply for the senior year and then maybe take a break? And also, how does that affect the loan application process?
Sure, so that's a great question. So gap year is becoming really, really popular right now. And so if a student's unsure what they want to do, I'm going to say go ahead and apply to the school. Because we actually have processes that most schools do where you can defer your admission for up to a year. So, but if you're unsure, what I don't want to happen is, well, I don't think I want to go anywhere, and then all of a sudden in May, you see all your friends start going back to school, and you're like, I should have said I was going to go to school, and then it's too late. So I would say go ahead and apply to the university, go ahead and do the financial aid as if you're going to go, and then talk to your school about deferring admission for a year, and then you just kind of restart the process once you're ready to come. If you don't go anywhere in that year, then you're basically seen as a freshman even though you've been off for a year.
But where does that, let's say you qualify for the loans for the scholarship, is that held in reserve for that student?
It's not held in reserve, but you apply for it kind of the next year. Most schools will honor, like most schools will still, it's the same process. You're still going to qualify for a merit award because you're technically considered a freshman. And then loans, you fill out the FAFSA, you're eligible for it again for this year, but you're still a freshman even though you took a year off. So it doesn't really change it a whole bunch.
And if that student wound up working for that year, that income they earn, does that go on the FAFSA? Because the FAFSA, I think the income was of 2 years before.
Right. So it would go on the FAFSA, but not for that first year. It would go on the FAFSA for when it catches
For a
up.
following
Yeah.
year. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yes.
Can I get a card?
No. I'm just kidding. Yes, of course. Yeah, I'll have a card available. So.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Lacey Gordon just said that, if you do take a gap year, you can't take any classes at Fort Georgetown, like,
Yes.
oh, I'll just take like one class or something like that. You can't
Yes.
take any school.
Yes, it has to be a true gap year, and one of the reasons for that, the state, once you start taking classes, it starts what we call your clock for state scholarships, and you only have 8 semesters. So once that clock starts, the only thing that stops it is military mobilization. So that's when I'm looking over,
So even if it's a non-accredited, like cooking or something like that?
Correct.
Okay.
Camp all that.
That's a great point, thank you.
Would have to be a true gap. Okay, so you're all financial aid gurus, right? This is our general financial aid contact information. I'm the only Sam that works in financial aid. I have students that call me, even to this day, to talk about their
right, so I handed out those folders. There's a couple things in there that you might find useful. First things first, my business card. I'm kidding. First things first is that Excel spreadsheet that you see there. These are numbers that my commanding officer pulled off of the internet, and if any of y'all have any military experience, you know that officers and research, it's kind of shaky. So some of the numbers might be a little bit off on the state tuition, but it really shouldn't make a difference when I tell you how all this applies to you and your student. Did anyone not get a folder? I made 40 and was told there was going to be like 20 people. So I'd rather be over-prepared. Wonderful. And would you mind passing that back? You know what? I can walk. I'm good. All right, so walk and talk. There we go. All right. So first and foremost, once we start, before we dig deep into this, let me introduce myself. My name is Staff Sergeant David Page. I am the National Guard recruiter and liaison for Carolina Forest, Loris, and the Academy here. That means that I serve probably double the number of students that any other recruiter in my station serves. And I say that term emphatically. There's your SAT, ACT prep, right? Emphatically. I say that emphatically when I say that I serve the students. Yes, my job is to recruit. I will be 100% upfront about that. But Mr. Price back there can tell you, I'm not ashamed to sit here and tell you, hey, this might be a better option for you. Let me help you any way I can, but this might be the way you need to go. Matthew, don't you lie on me. For those of you who do not know, Matthew's kind of like a nephew of mine. He grew up with my two nephews that go to school. Oh, one of them goes to school here. But anyway, I am a diehard Chanticleer fan myself. I graduated from there twice, just like other people. My sister currently works there in the Office of Graduate Studies, Caitlin Nash. Yes, y'all all know her, and she's much prettier and much friendlier than I am. She got all the good ends of the stick, and I got strength. And a strong back, so yeah, it worked. But anyway, like I said, so my job is to serve students. I come in, I do presentations, I talk to them, and I'm going to basically do the same thing for them that I'm going to do for you guys tonight. And let's explain how the military is no longer an option, it's an opportunity. And it is more of an opportunity in the National Guard and when it comes to college. Now, I know I'm not going to just push National Guard. I know that's not why y'all brought me in here. But then again, I don't really know what the Navy does. I know they have ships. And they offer some financial aid. So, I'm going to be talking about it from my point of view because it's what I know. Okay? I was a music teacher. You do not want me to teach math. Musicians count to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. We don't go any higher. So, I'm going to talk about it from my perspective and from what I understand and know thoroughly, but understand that these same things can apply for other branches. And I encourage you, if that is a route you're considering, please go explore. Please, go explore your options. Go explore the opportunities that are out there. If you have questions, I am here to serve you and help you. And say, hey, can you show me that in the regulations so that I can make sure you're not giving them, something that's a little screwy. Because that's how I operate. I'll show you the regulation that says I can do that. So first and foremost, let's look at these colleges, okay? Since we had a wonderful presentation from Coastal Carolina, Chants, diehard fans, same seat since 2003 in that stadium, rode on the the goalpost when it was torn down for that first game. Literally, 12 years old, hanging on to it. It's great. Let's take a look at Coastal Carolina since it's on there, okay? Her number was actually pretty close to mine. I think you had 11,600, something like that. I think I've got it at 11,686 or something like that. If I were 650. Okay, so I rounded down because math's easier that way. Told you, musician, 6. All right, so 11,650, pretty accurate number. And I only cover tuition in this spreadsheet. If y'all would like one that y'all can look at, I got plenty. Y'all can grab one. That way you're not having to crank your day. Here. I have plenty. So, what I have here is we have several different pools of funding that are available to National Guard soldiers. The first one is the one that every member of the military receives. It doesn't matter what branch they're in, they receive this in some form or fashion. It's called Federal Tuition Assistance. Anyone who signs up to join the military to serve our country is going to get $4,000 a year in federal tuition assistance, whether they're a reserve or active duty. That $4,000 a year does change and does vary to what that branch is going to allow. For example, Air Force will allow you to use the FTA at the Air Force Academy. South Carolina Army National Guard will allow you to use FTA at any school in the state of South Carolina. The National Guard Bureau as a whole will let you, and there's a reason I say National Guard Bureau as a whole. I'm going to get there, I promise. Might apply to what you were asking a question about earlier, sir. So, National Guard Bureau as a whole will allow any institution to use federal tuition assistance. Now, the next thing on there, you see in the next column, it should show you what that cost is going to be after you apply federal tuition assistance and what is called the South Carolina CAP, College Assistance Program, which brings it down pretty significantly if I remember correctly, because if $11,650, it should bring it down to like $2,150. So after just those two particular funds that you get, it brings it down at Coastal to $2,150. Now, that cap that you see on there, SC cap, is only for South Carolina Army National Guard soldiers. What that is lottery-funded money that's set aside every year for the members of the South Carolina Army National Guard who choose to go to school. No other branch, reserve or active, can offer that funding. So whereas every branch of the military will give you $4,000 to go to school, plus if you're reserve, you get the reserve GI Bill, and if you are active, you will get the post 9/11. While every branch can offer you that, no other branch, component, anything can offer you that extra $5,500. So in total, National Guard soldiers, without touching GI Bill, without touching FAFSA, without touching loans, anything like that, have $9,500 to go to school. It's a pretty good start, especially when you consider how much those scholarships and everything else are. Now, if you'll notice, this is double-sided. The other side's got private institutions. This side has public institutions. You'll see that a couple of them are red after CAP, right? There are very few schools that our FTA and our South Carolina tuition assistance don't cover entirely, but for those schools that it doesn't, you can either apply the Life Scholarship, or if your student so chooses, you can apply the Montgomery GI Bill, Chapter 1606, which is the Select Reserve. That is a grand total of $439 a month that will go directly tax-free into their bank account so that they can apply it to paying for the remainder of their school. I used it, and my school was paid off. My GI Bill went into my bank account, which then went into buying fun stuff. Like taking my now wife, then girlfriend, on dates. I thought I was bald. I was not. Still not. But, that having been said, all of these funds can be used together. The Federal Tuition Assistance, SC CAP, and the Montgomery GI Bill Select Reserve can all be used together. Now here's where this gets really amazing, is anything that you get from any South Carolina institution can also be used in conjunction with those funds. So that last column you'll see, it says tuition with SC Life. I went with Life because I know Hope is 1 year and Palmetto Fellows, that one's up in the air as to who gets it. So Life is just a good base ground for us to start with. If you get Palmetto Fellows, great. Add, what is it, $1,700 for the first year and another $2,500 after that. Not bad. But this tells you right here exactly where you stand. Now, again, this is tuition alone. But if you notice, every you owe $0 if you can get a 3.0 and if you join the National Guard. Now, obviously there's going to be questions as to what do you do when it comes to the Guard, how does that work? Those I'll be happy to answer on a one-on-one basis because, hey, for some people, this isn't for everyone. I understand that. The National Guard is not for everyone. But it is a great opportunity for people to look into because, number one, it'll pay for your education. Number two, depending on what you want to do, it can actually give you job experience. So I had a, Ms. Gordon, or Ms. Wilson. Would it be okay if I spoke about a former student? Is that acceptable or not?
Probably not using any names, yeah. Yeah, no names.
So no names, but other than that, okay. So I had a young man that joined out here. His name, let's call him Private A. Private A, because he is a private. It's the first letter of the alphabet, and that's just easy for me. So Private A joined. Private A wanted to go into the medical field. We were able to get him a job as a healthcare specialist. Now, after he completed his training, he had a semester and a half worth of college credits towards his major, and he's already got 2 years of experience in a healthcare field. By the time he graduates college with his degree, Private A will have 5 years of work experience, 5 years of military experience, and is attending the college of his choice free of charge. Not a bad deal. Also on there, I want y'all to take a look at a couple things. There's a couple schools on the public side that are kind of interesting. If you notice there, any of the USC schools, you notice after federal tuition assistance and CAP, without even touching your GI Bill, the tuition is paid for. That means if you choose to go to that school, any scholarships and stuff like that that you get that can be applied to room and board can then be applied to room and board, and potentially your tuition and your room and board, depending on how you play your cards, is 100% paid for. To go to the University of South Carolina, they do that because they have a program with active military personnel that they will give a reduction in tuition. And when I say active, I mean currently serving, whereas National Guard soldiers are reservists. They're still serving. They still, just like me, have a military ID card. They still put on the uniform. They still, USC feels, deserve that same respect and treatment, which I think is amazing. There's other opportunities as well. If that is something you choose to do, you can go to ROTC at the collegiate level. ROTC at the collegiate level will provide you, depending on schools. I know Coastal Carolina, any ROTC student who's a member of the National Guard receives the Presidential Scholarship, which is an additional $500 a year. Not only that, but they receive a stipend for serving and doing ROTC, which is an additional $420 a month. So that second sheet that I had in there is just kind of a brief overview of some of the stuff that's on there, or that we talked about already. So the first thing in that right-hand column is, it talks about the federal tuition assistance. It breaks it down for you pretty succinctly. Another SAT, ACT prep work. Then it goes into the CAP, the GI Bill, and the kicker. For those of you who are unaware of what that would mean, if you score 50 or higher on the ASVAB and you join, you qualify for an additional $350 plus the $439 that will be deposited to your bank account, tax-free, for you to assist in paying for school, book, whatever. Dates with a pretty girl. I don't know. Those are just a brief overview of our financial aid assistance things. On the other side, it talks about your career. We have different things in there that might be useful to you. I don't know everyone's particular situation, but that's not my business. And then on the back, as you can see, is a picture of me with Chauncey, or Chauncey. I have a 4-year-old who says Chauty, so I have to say Chauty, or Chauncey. I don't know. I love her. She's great. On the back is a picture of me and a little biography of me. It does talk about me going to Coastal, graduating from there twice. Also my office partner down there. There's our contact information. If you want to speak with myself or Staff Sergeant Richardson, who we work together as a team, please feel free to reach out to us. If I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to call me. All I ask is that you hear my side and hear what I have, and then I will help you in any way I can. Again, I told you I'm not very long-winded, and my goal was to get done with this at 7:20, so I'm doing pretty good on that factor. I am gonna stay behind. If you want to ask me some questions individually, that would be wonderful. I'm happy to answer them. There was also a little card in there that if you don't have time to stick around, but you want some further information, if you'll just fill it out, the back is blank, write down basically what you want to, briefly what it is your kind of question would be, and then I'll be happy to reach back out to you tomorrow sometime after work hours and do the research during the day to make sure that I give you the most factual answer I can. Are there any questions of me thus far? Oh, I said one, forgot, you mentioned out of state and I said National Guard Bureau. So here's what's really cool. If you join the South Carolina Army National Guard and your student decides, hey, I want to go to Ohio. Well, let me use Kentucky, because Kentucky has the same benefits plus one extra one. So let's say they want to go to the University of Kentucky. Kentucky National Guard, if you transfer from the state of South Carolina to the state of Kentucky and be a National Guard soldier, you are automatically granted in-state tuition, and in-state tuition is 100% paid. So just because you join here, if you choose to go to school in another location, you have those opportunities and you have the option to take advantage of their benefits. So, does anyone have any questions they want to ask right now? Otherwise, I'm going to let us get going, and that way, if y'all have questions for me individually, I'll be happy to answer them. Awesome.